I like my shirt.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. I think we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the episode 7 of a Small Language Model Show. This is Malikeh speaking, co-host of the show and applied developer researcher at RC. Today, we are here again with another exciting topic, the good, the bad, and the ugly of AI and finance data. So today, I'll be co-hosting the show with Brian, CRO of RC, and also we have two very special guests, Kirk, McKeown, the co-host and CEO of Carbonark, and also Shamane, Siri, the head of applied developer research engineering at RC. Welcome everyone to the show. So to start with, stage is yours, Brian. Can you tell us how you and Kirk met and what's the story behind the partnership between RC and Carbonark?
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely kick this off. Kirk, I'm sure, has his own opinions of this one too. So, yeah, Kirk and I go back to probably when I was in 4th grade. I think that's when I made a move over and transitioned to being in the same neighborhood as Kirk. And we've been friends for a very long time. Our families are really good friends. And yeah, so we were kind of old friends, and we reunited after many years of just learning and seeing what he's been up to and seeing how we can potentially be working together. So it was a great collaboration. Super excited to have him here to talk about Carbonark and what they're doing on the data side. I think it's going to be really interesting to our audience. So Kirk, yeah, thanks for joining us today.
No, thanks for having me. And yeah, it's funny to reconnect after, sort of literally 30 years, some 30, 40, almost 40. We're getting showing our age.
You don't have to use numbers at this point, Kirk.
Yeah, it helps with adding some gray in the beard for the whole AI conversation. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Experience can be a tailwind, but it's nice to see everybody, and thanks for having me.
You bet.
Thank you. We're so excited to have you on the show. So, yeah, Kirk, could you please briefly introduce yourself to our audience? We'd love to hear about your story, your journey, and what's got you to the field.
Sure. So, thanks for having me again. To give a little background on how I landed on a show about generative AI in finance from a little town called Medford, where me and Brian grew up. I spent almost 20 years working on the buy side and investment management on Wall Street. And I had a non-traditional route to Wall Street. I worked at a place called Tudor Investments right out of college, and I was in their mid to late stage technology VC group. This is 1999, 2000, 2001. And I dialed and smiled and called private companies to see if they needed money back then. So very comfortable on the phone, doing deep tissue, private company due diligence in different end markets, understanding all the different players in a space and how they made money and all that fun stuff. And that ended up being sort of the foundational elements of what my skill set was when I became a fundamental analyst on the street. I ended up working at a place called Glenview Capital. I started there as a fundamental analyst post-business school, and then landed in a role and an opportunity where my faculties lay in primary due diligence. I was really good at finding information, synthesizing it, and delivering it to people making investment decisions in a compliant way, and being able to sort of scale that type of skill set. And so I ended up building a sizable primary research team at Glenview, collecting and synthesizing information through call transcripts. So I built and ran the biggest, call center business on Wall Street back in the mid 2000s. And when the government started looking at how people were getting their information, what they were doing with it, we were the largest players in the street and didn't have an issue. And so, fundamentally through good compliance decisions by the firm and the right approach from a collection perspective by us, we ended up being the biggest players in the space, but having sort of a really good setup, to execute on, growing that business. And then I ended up going to SAC to work for, Steve Cohen in 2012 to build a similar business. And at that point, I got more involved in sort of unstructured and structured data as it emerged on Wall Street. But my bailiwick on Wall Street was really to start building these domain-specific, bottoms-up, fundamental call center channel check businesses where we did thousands and thousands and thousands of calls, tracking change in supply chains to better understand what was going on in the world. And then I went to build that at SAC. And then along the way, by the time I left Point72, I was there for the change and the reorg and all the restructuring post the troubles. I managed 110 people, had a couple hundred data sets in production. I was doing, we had 1,000 tickers that we were covering globally with 100 internal clients, trading 30 or $40 billion of fundamental capital and long short. And had built this really massive business and run it over a 9-year period. And that was the setup to go start Carbonark. And so I left after COVID, went through a lot of really interesting stuff for over an 8.5-year period with Steve and the team. Left on great terms. I still have a nice relationship with those guys and started Carbonark. And so been at the build in Carbonark for 3 years. Most days I'm really happy I did it. There are plenty of times where, I don't love the entrepreneurial thing. I always thought I was an entrepreneur building businesses inside of large organizations. It turned out I was not. I was an entrepreneur. I didn't have to worry about capital or customer base. And so it's been a labor of love. And along the way, got reconnected with Brian and the team at RC. And, we were early to the data structuring game, which means we were on time. And data structure plus model build with context and framework overlays is really this incredible opportunity set that I don't think has gotten frankly, the attention it deserves yet. In this new sort of AI economy that's more emerging real time. So I'm excited to be on the call with you guys today to talk about it.
Fantastic. Yeah, super exciting journey. I'm sure today we're going to learn a lot of things from you. So let's get back to the main topic because we have both technical and non-technical audience. So to start with, we're focusing on LLM for finance for now. So to start with, it would be great if you talk about some most common applications of LLM for finance. Can you bring up some real world successful examples of integrating those with financial institutions?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as we've seen over the past couple of years, excuse me, a lot of the early thrust has been sort of, in the text-based space. There's certainly, a massive amount of transactional, data, both in the market data space, but also what I would call in the external data space. People call it the alternative data space, but that's your clickstream and card and receipt and everything else. You've got your, text-based unstructured data through Twitter Firehose and Social Graph, what have you. But there's also a real lot of rich textured data, both in sort of what I would call the warehouses or repositories of expert calls, call transcripts, Edgar, Fred, sort of all of the regulatory filings. And that's where a lot of the early wood has been chopped and where a lot of the early success stories have come in. At the end of the day, you're like with any type of data product, you're really trying to create one of three things: more at bats, a higher hit rate on those at bats, or bigger bets, right? And data should inform one of those three, if not all of those three, in a financial context, but also in any context. If you're trying to sell T-shirts and shorts, or you're trying to get more people to come to a hockey game, you're still selling a conversion rate, or you're selling a hit rate, or you're selling more opportunities, right? Where I see a lot of the early days is really sort of improving the quality of a synthesized output and shortening the amount of time that people have to spend on said output, and so which increases your throughput, right? So you get higher productivity curves out of your analysts and out of your PM teams, which allows you to sort of continue to distill the massive amount of information that machines and people have to sort of create the space for to make better risk decisions. At the end of the day, you're trying to improve a hit rate on tickers at a multi-manager by a couple hundred basis points, which is an outsized massive opportunity. And that comes from a higher hit rate on more at-bats.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Kirk, I'd love you to dive deeper into, I know when you and I talk a lot, and, I think it's pretty transparent, Kirk and Carbonark is a vendor in which we use here at RC. Very happy with the work that they do with us. But one thing that you always say, Kirk, is, think bigger. You're always telling us, when it comes to like the data sets and the volume in terms of getting to the answers of the different KPIs we're trying to think bigger. I'd love for you to kind of dive into like Carbonark a little bit and kind of, some of the data and how you guys typically, go about thinking about what data sets for what different use cases and how you guys apply that to the work that you all do.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it'd be helpful just to step back and sort of lay out the vision statement and the problem statement that we're trying to solve.
Perfect.
And then sort of lean into the think bigger. So sitting in the seat that I sat in, at Point 72 over the years, I was buying a lot of data. My team was buying a lot of data. And we had the wallet to do it, and we had the market to monetize it in, right? That was one of the beauties of working on Wall Street. We were early to the party around taking consumption data and converting it into alpha, converting it into, sort of monetizable insight. And so, but what was interesting was, sort of, we always realized that we had better visibility into what was going on to the companies we were trading than the companies we were trading, with completely compliant, above board, understanding of the data that we were working in. And it always confused me. And then I started to peel the onion and realize that sort of for all the data that existed in the world, very little of it was making it into the hands of decision makers. And there was a number of reasons for that. There were the data monopolies like Nielsen and IRI, which created all of these imbalances to innovate underneath, right? They would buy and cancel companies. CoStar was another one. Every vertical had their sort of like monopolistic players. And then you had sort of, big tech, which were natural monopolies, like, sort of Facebook and Google, where data went in and never came out. You had the oligopolies like Snowflake and Databricks, which made it really hard to move data around. Those are analytics platforms where you get in and you're locked in, and then they make money on workloads, right? And at the end of the day, you're churning and burning, right? But the data doesn't flow. Again, we're talking about imbalances. And all those things were happening, and then privacy and the lack of standardization and the ability to willingness to pay for data was the biggest driver of liquidity. And with that, it's not a functioning market, right? And so, sort of started to really look at that, and then COVID hit, and we had great visibility into what was happening to the economy and to our companies, and frankly, to the hospitals and all the things, just by looking at all these different data feeds and understanding consumer behavior and the consumer economy and the regulatory and mask on, mask off, and all the things. And after COVID was like, I got to go figure this out. And so, started the business and, raised a big friends and family and started to buy data. And we actually believe at CarbonArc is that data is an asset, that, the folks that own the data should be paid commensurate for that asset. It should be securitized in the way that mortgages were securitized in the 1970s. And a marketplace needs to be created where folks like RC or Procter and Gamble or, pick your company trying to solve decisions with data. They should be able to come and pay for what they consume. The way data is bought and sold now, it's a CapEx. It's a capital expenditure. It's super hard to buy. It's easier to buy a car or a house in the United States than it is to buy a data set. Fact. It takes less time. It's a more seamless process, and it's a smaller brokerage fee. It's fundamental, right? And it's standardized, and there are rules and laws around it. And data is the Wild West. And so we're sitting here, and fast forward 3 years, we have a two-sided consumption-based platform where we face up with our customers. They come in, they can plug into our API, and they can pull actionable KPIs, metrics, models, whatever they need into their environment to make better decisions and build better models. Our data plus their data equals better data. And it's all the data that's fit the print. It's around how people spend their time, money, balance sheet, and visibility into supply chains. And it's really based on the idea to think bigger. Frameworks scale and probabilities scale, right? If you try to be too precise or have too much deterministic, it actually starts to collapse on itself. But you want to build a lot of surface here. We built for 2030. We're built in Graph. We're built on Iceberg. We're doing all the next gen things that need to be done. And we're really structuring the business around the idea that, sort of everything's going to come down to differentiation. And that is more data and better questions. And if we structure the data right, you guys will need less tokens to build your models, because the data texture is going to be what you want to build it on. And, low cost on the data, low cost on the energy drives better outcomes. And that's how people are going to win, right? The last thing I'll say is like when Ken Griffin or when Seth Klarman or Abby Johnson or Robinhood folks show up every day at 9:30 in the New York Stock Exchange, they all have different fixed costs, different variable costs, different ways of making money, but they're all trying to produce the same return.
Yep.
right? They have different time horizons, everything else. But the creativity that they all bring to the table, we want to create that same level of creativity for people building decision models.
Yep. It's great. Yeah, great background there. Shamane, you've been awfully quiet today, which is not typically your shtick. What are your thoughts on that? Knowing that you live on the LLM side of the house, given the data side.
Yeah. So first of all, I think my technical team definitely knows this. I'm a big believer of data-centric AI. That's pretty much related to my prior work and all. So data-centric AI is more of data is like the king. But right now I can see this being getting shifted. But it's like, for me, I don't believe in that. Like, for example, people say, oh, LLMs, these models have seen like 15 trillions of data. Like, you don't need to 15 trillions of tokens or something. We don't need to add any more. But it's not true. Like, I would say, like, better data will always give better models. And this is huge when it comes to domain specific use cases. It's like we need to specialize these models to get better outcomes in real world. The only way to do it is by kind of showing these models what are these real data sources are. These data sources could be task specific or domain specific. And yeah, I think like another thing is like this is more like a factual thing. You can see all these big companies, they are releasing model checkpoints, right? One thing they don't release is that data sets. But in the paper, they say like, okay, we have used these public sources. But when you like kind of open source I don't know, like $2 million, $3 million models, why not the data set? That's the thing, right? Like, they know data is like the biggest thing. And also, I also really like one thing that Kirk mentioned, like having good data set sources actually can reduce the cost, because we are not putting all the garbage in, right? Like maybe, so there's this saying, like maybe 1 billion really good tokens would sort out the thing rather than using 10 billion really garbage tokens, right? So 10 to 1 means we are reducing the cost by a huge margin. So yeah, I'm like, I think how this field will move is still be data centric, because that is the fundamental of this area. Like LLMs, which is just a name. The core concept behind LLM is something called self-supervised learning. That is like, we can make sure models can learn without any human labor, right? So that means, yes, we can feed a lot of data. So that even that data is really good. Like, these models will be better in future. So yeah, just to wrap this up, another example is like Llama 2 versus Llama 3. Like, fundamentally speaking, there's not much of a big theoretical difference in these two models. Like, I mean, if you go inside these model architectures and all, it's kind of the same. But Llama 3 is way better, right? It's like, it's really good. But why? Like, because more data, like they have trained that on 15 trillion token. I'm 100% sure it's kind of a refined data set as well. And another thing I assume is they have a really big team that is kind of doing this data processing, cleaning, and especially maybe buying. I don't know. Like, there should be something, right? Why these big giants can kind of break the wave by introducing a new model. Same architecture theoretically, but somehow it's really good, right? So yeah.
Good stuff. Good points. Malikeh, you had something over there?
Yeah, regarding the mentioned about data centric, like LLM idea. So I wonder, Shamane, based on your experience of integrating data sets from different domains, in particular finance, like how do you see the limitations of applying or training these LLMs onto data sets, both from the amount perspective and quality perspective? So have you had any experiences of injecting more knowledge in terms of amount of data did not really help with getting good domain specific results, and then it motivated you to like go for a better quality of data rather than amount of data?
Yeah, like I'll start with the amount. So amount is always kind of a tricky idea. Like, what is the best amount, right? That's like a hot question out there, even in our company. It's a hard question as well, because, as I say, more data, better models, right? But it's like I really want to get data from kind of trusted sources. That's what the missing point for me is, because I'm not a finance specialist, right? Like, I mean, I can't understand these financial documents. So one way is I can kind of scrape the internet and kind of download this data by myself, like all the public data. But then I don't know are these sources are kind of valuable, or like what do they say? Like, they could be like just normal data, right? But having these carbon kind of specialized firms or companies can help us that way, right? Like, okay, we know what we are doing. Here's good. These data sets are really good, like, because there's this validation. I think that is the missing part with the open source community when it comes to data. That's one thing. Then the quality, like, one best example is when it comes to finance. I'm 100% sure you need to keep the kind of format of the data. Like, if it's a table, it should be a table, because so then we need to kind of make sure how we feed that into the LLM. So you get what I'm saying, right? It's not just like Wikipedia data. Like, when you see a financial document or an agreement, that's different, because we humans, like, we can go through a table. We know it's a table. That's how we interpret these values and all, right? So formatting is important. So that's a part of the quality thing for me. Like, how, like, quality means like how we feed this, how we feed this, but what is the state this data set should be. So yeah, in finance, like, main challenges for me are like validity of the data sources. I don't know, like, which they are really good or bad. And then when you don't have a good idea of like these data sources are really good or bad, you might keep downloading a lot of data, and you might be actually hurting the model, right? So that's one thing. And quality wise, I would really like to kind of, it's not like, I would really like to feed some sort of human knowledge, like specific human knowledge, like, hey, don't format this data like this. So there's a big field growing in the research called human-centric artificial intelligence. Like, it's not, yeah, LLMs will at some point will take over. That's like, we can see that, but human should be in the center. That means we have this control. That control is not only during the inference or during creating this during using this application, but building that application process also need some sort of that stage also needs some sort of human intervention, like experts, right? So yeah, like, those are like my quick thoughts. If I
Cool.
Shamane, you made some good points here. I want to jump in and ask Kirk this question too. I mean, you mentioned, data quality as well as formatting. Kirk, when it comes to like Carbon Arc, when you think of like your client roster and stuff, what do you think the priority is there? I mean, obviously both are important, but if you had to kind of say, these companies really have problems with X out of those two things, or maybe something else, where would you kind of say it lies?
Well, it's if you think about quality, you can pull quality apart into a couple different, sort of modalities, right? There's quality in terms of removing duplicates and making sure it's clean and there aren't nulls and everything's, sort of structured in a thoughtful way. That's one semblance of quality. Then is it relatable or predictive of the world or the thing, right? Yep. So there's that component, which has different. That's on a spectrum. It's not binary. And then there's the third leg of the stool, which we think about, which is experience, right? Like ease of use, discoverability, all of the different things. I think I would say a couple things as we're on a finance centered chat. Like the thing that's, I think, most important that is being lost a little bit in this sort of cycle that we're in AI is that AI is a model driven business, right? And my view of the West Coast and what they're doing right now, and I use that term broadly, is they're still running the business like it's a software business. They're racing to get things out, and there's a ton of PR around it, and it's this and it's that, and it's it's a very big sort of hype cycle, and there's some really great gains that are occurring, but like everybody's sort of speculating what's going to happen over the next 10 years in AI, and it's like all you have to do is look at Wall Street. There have been model-driven businesses on Wall Street for 50 years. And they all went through a cycle and a process and a competitive dynamic around competitive advantage and data structure and factors and market structure. And it's already happened. So all you have to do is look at Two Sigma and Rentec and D.E. Shaw. And the way those guys competed were model integrity, data integrity, and compliance. I'm not seeing a lot of that in AI right now, of anything, right? And so for whatever that's worth, that and $2 to buy a cup of coffee. But like, the thing I would say is, and I think RC does a really nice job of this based on everything I've seen, is that finance is all about counterparties. Like I actually don't think of us as a vendor. I think of us as a counterparty. We are executing a trade with you. We are trading high quality data inputs to power your model. And then you are engaging with us with, sort of sharing back with us elements of that model and other things, but it's a counterparty relationship. We are partners. It's not vendor supplier, and that's Wall Street. That's finance. Finance is all about counterparties. Morgan Stanley faces up to Fidelity, and Point72 faces up to Goldman, right? And like that's a really interesting dynamic, and something that's how you manage quality. Is they're both people are economically aligned on both sides of the table, and I see the world moving that way, right? Yes. Even the token framework for models and everything else. There's something very economic about the way things are being built. Our customers care about quality, and they care about quality even if they don't know they care about quality, because they want really great. They want great outcomes, and I actually don't think you can get to great outcomes in data over time without a high quality framework, right? When I worked in data on Wall Street, one of the things we spent a lot of time on is what is this data good for and what is this data not? And let's know that cold so that when we're engaging with our counterparties, we can be arbiters of quality.
Yep.
This is a great name for credit card. This is not, because 50% of their business is cash pay.
Right.
Volatility in the underlying. It doesn't mean the data is bad. It just means it doesn't line up with the way the world engages with that name, right? And so in the same vein, having that level of credibility over time, it takes a while to build that level of quality inside of an organization, because you have to, sort of walk before you run. I think that's sort of a thing that, is what people are valuing the most, is knowing that what they're getting has been contextualized and thought through and is something that they'd be comfortable passing along.
That's great. Yeah, really good points there. I know we're kind of getting up on time. Malikeh, Shamane, anything to counter on what Kirk said, or other thoughts there?
Yeah, totally agree. Like, very great points. So just as a final question, I think data is the fuel, and that's one of the things that comes from the domain experts. And we do all this training, and I think at the very end point, we again need that domain expertise. And sometimes evaluation metrics are already there, but they're not aligned with what the expectation of domain experts are. So I just wanted to hear like Kirk feedback on this part of like how, like in terms of, because data set can also be used for evaluation part and also to meet the expectations of the users. So I was thankful if we hear your thoughts on how this evaluation can be in a way that we have both good chat capabilities and also to like meet the expectations of finance community actually.
What's the question?
So mainly the evaluation. So we first of all get the data from you, structured, high quality data, and that the pipeline would be there. We do the LLM training. At the end of the day, we will come up with a chatbot or LLM for finance. So in terms of evaluation, I'm wondering, like, from your perspective, how it would be like to meet the actual expectation of finance community.
When we train models ourselves, we spend a lot of time prototyping, going from, it's train, and then it's really thumbs up, thumbs down on results, right? Like getting active practitioners in the data, fleshing it out. The human in loop is super important because you're going to get to 70%, sort of the best credit card revenue estimates are probably 75 to 77% on revenues on the street. The M Science guys are probably have the best revenue estimates on the street. They're at like 76, 77%. But your hit rates are still in the high 50s, right? So like there's still that gap of revenue flowing through to an actual trading outcome that's positive, right? In the same vein, getting that sort of that model toggled and tweaked to a place where PMs are going to be comfortable receiving it without human in loop is probably where you want to win. You want to completely supplant that human in loop in the end state, but that's going to take iteration and then finding the beta customers you're going to work with who are going to be super engaged on that and incentivized to get it there too, right? I think it's creating the right incentive structure and the right gamification around the A/B testing to ensure that the outputs are what they need to be so the model can keep learning. And then it's just updating it frequently and continuing to add data assets that'll improve the model integrity over time.
Yep. Makes sense, my man. Makes sense. Well, listen, Kirk, I know we're out of time, unfortunately. This has been great. Super interesting to hear more about your journey and your story. Carbon Arc, great company. If you haven't checked them out yet, definitely check them out. We'll be releasing a model pretty soon on our side with pretty much a big finance model that's coming out. It's going to have a lot of Carbon Arc data in it. So be on the lookout for that. And at that point, we'll let everybody go and enjoy the rest of their day. Kirk, thanks again for joining.
Thank you so much, guys. Really great to see you.
Everyone.
Be good.
All right, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care.